Hey everybody, zombie fans, welcome to this 34th episode of Reanimated. My name is Stuart Tiffin on the West Coast, and joining me out east is my good friend and co-host, H.A. Conrad. How's it going today?
It's going well. Cannot complain. Having a great day.
Fantastic. It's so early too. How'd you manage that?
I don't know.
I guess I owe our listeners, all two or three of them, an apology for the great delay here. I've been having some real life happening. So between work and stuff, I just had a tough time getting cutting out chunks to do the podcast. But now we're back.
I thought this was all due to personal training sessions.
There have been some of those.
So are you preparing to run from zombies? Is that the thing? Because that's a good excuse, I think.
Well, people are trying to convince me to do another half marathon this year. So if I want to avoid cardiac arrest, I should probably train for this one. The last one I finished as a fluke. I was supposed to run those without really training first.
Yeah, probably not, but lots of people do.
So yeah, if I do another one in the fall or late summer, yeah, I should probably do some training.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it hasn't all been for personal training. No, there's just been work and house guests and good stuff like that. So
All good things. But we're back. So I guess we should dive into our latest in zombie news before getting to our reviews of season 2, episodes 7 and 8 of The Walking Dead.
yeah, and before we can even do that, we have to say cheers to our sponsor, Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own website. Cheers, dudes.
Thanks, Squarespace. You're amazing.
Okay, tone it back a bit. Bring it in.
um, but I actually saw this latest news item in a couple places.
Yep,
Um,
it's been
and
popping up more and more lately.
Right, and I was curious, have you seen anything to do with this particular video game? And what we are talking about is the H1Z1, zombie survival game. And this is from Sony, is that correct?
Yep. It is. It's by Sony Online Entertainment. I'm not sure if they are. I guess yeah, they are the developer. I've been playing games from Sony since like online games that Sony's been making since '99 or '98. So I like the fact that Smedley is behind this. I'm very familiar with the. He's one of the big names in that studio. Anyway, so yeah, they're making it. I mean, they're making a zombie survival game. This basically means that it's DayZ. It's a little bit contentious because it's not super original at this point.
Right.
But what they're bringing to the table that is different, based on some stuff on Reddit and some videos that I've seen, is more of a true survival mentality where like you are building shelters. You have to like you can either choose to try and be a lone wolf, or you can work together with other players to create a group or a community, almost a la Walking Dead, I guess. Um,
And you can do things more to the world, right? You can have a greater impact. Is that the idea?
yeah, you got like destructible environments, and yeah, you there's going to be a lot of emphasis on altering the environment to affect your survivability, essentially, which is I
Hmm.
think a pretty cool approach, and it's something that they're also doing in the fantasy setting with the new EverQuest game too at the moment. So
Right.
it's kind of they're already kind of deep into this concept, so it will probably it'll probably translate fairly well, I would assume.
And just there is another article that we're going to link to in the show notes, and it's basically Smedley talking about the fact that they're not using a traditional marketing strategy for this game, and they're getting a lot of player feedback, which hopefully would make it a better game, right?
Yeah, it is interesting that they based their website for a while. I don't know if it's still the case. Was just pointing to a Reddit page.
Right.
Yeah, it still is. You go to h1z1.com and it's just a link to the subreddit against with a weird, like atmospheric backdrop. It's kind of crazy.
Right. But, I think it absolutely makes sense because a lot of the people that tend to spread the word are the people that have enjoyed the experience of playing, and this way they get to actually interact with the developers, which is kind of a cool thing. And I think that that is a reaction to the way things are working now, which is that, I mean, honestly, who is really looking at the traditional ad and marketing campaigns anymore for this kind of thing?
It's hard
You're
to.
not, I don't know that you're going to play a game just because you see an ad, right?
I don't know that. I mean, I've also seen some press in the last couple months basically decrying the gaming community for being just a bunch of entitled assholes, which is not far from the truth. So, like, to put your entire marketing campaign in the hands of those guys, it's ballsy. I mean, Reddit
Mm,
sometimes can be like more of a noble internet community, and I think
yeah.
at the same time, like, very much the opposite of that. But I don't know. I think it's questionable, but we'll see how well they do as a result.
Right. And in other gaming news, I was very excited to see, or amused to see rather, um, the actor from Walking Dead who plays Carl basically
Chandler
had,
Riggs.
yes, he basically he has his own little gaming following, I guess.
Well, I don't know if it's a following. He's publishing his own videos of him playing DayZ with his buddies, though.
I bet he has a following. I can't imagine that he doesn't. Um, but it's kind of funny that that's what he's choosing to do, but makes sense, I suppose. He's probably pretty good at it by now.
Well, they've done 3 episodes. The first one that they put out 2 weeks ago has almost 70,000 views. That's pretty good. Of course, he has a bit of celebrity power, like propelling him there.
Right.
You can make a little bit of money off of that. Did he even have ads? He does, I think, right?
I'm sure he does.
Yeah. It's a really interesting sort of peek into, I don't know, child actors.
Yeah, right?
Have you watched all 3 of these or listened
No,
to them?
I only watched the first one.
The second one, they're talking about like, does he have a girlfriend? And he's like, yeah. And he throws out a name, and one of his friends is like, yeah, okay. People kept asking me, and I didn't know if I could confirm it or. So it gets a little bit like, oh, Chandler Riggs. Now we know more about your life. I feel like TMZ should be watching this feed and writing
They, they,
articles about him.
they probably are, and they probably will.
But yeah,
Uh,
it's just him and a couple of other teenage kids running around making goofy jokes and playing DayZ together.
yeah, that's kind of cool. Good for him having a life.
Yeah.
So had you ever seen the show Sharknado, or the movie rather?
No, I should. I guess it's one of those like rites of passage sorts of things, huh?
I don't know if I could recommend it. It was very hard to watch. And I don't even know if I could put it into the so good it's bad or so bad it's good category rather.
Rather.
Um, so I'm not sure how I feel about the fact that the makers of Sharknado are now saying that they have made or are making a zombie TV series. Um, so it's supposed to be after a zombie apocalypse, basically, in Spokane, I believe, Washington. And it's following survivors and their quest for a cure. If they're going with the Sharknado formula, I would imagine this is going to be pretty bad.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be pretty hard to come back from that stigma.
Right.
Reading the plot kind of overview, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, it's set 3 years after a zombie virus. Only one survivor of the plague lives on, but he has to be transported across the country to a lab where a sample of his zombie-free blood can hopefully create a vaccine. So he can't be the only survivor. There must be other people.
Yeah, but maybe he's the only person not. Maybe it's like a slow burn infection, so they're trying to work against the clock.
It sounds a little bit like Andromeda Strain.
Yeah, so we'll see. Um, our last bit of news is actually the one that I found the most interesting today. It's kind of cool. And it's basically about how Siemens is designing transportation systems in cities to help people move quickly in the event of um like a crisis event. So, you know, they say Z-Day, but they're also, obviously likening it to what happens if there's a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or something like that. And they do models about how to efficiently move a lot of people and design transportation systems to move a lot of people very quickly in times of emergency. It's if you ride public transportation, especially in New York, I think some of this is kind of interesting, except, even on the best of days, the trains are pretty slow. So the imagining evacuating an entire city with that is going to be fascinating. But
Which which train would you take to like escape New York? I feel like don't they all just go in circles?
no, I mean, some of them go. I guess if you were trying to get out of the city, my guess is you would be taking Metro North or something of that like. But it's sort of, the other things that they do is deal with, the traffic grid as well as the trains. So,
Honestly, that was the most interesting part of the article to me was the adaptive traffic light concept.
yeah,
The
yeah,
problem is that most traffic lights can't go from being like, okay, green goes straight to a system of arrows. Like if all
right,
traffic lights were adaptive that way, and suddenly you could make streets one way that were not one way before, that would be there's a lot of potential also for a hacker to like wreak havoc on a city.
oh,
But
obviously,
if you could just make everything, I don't know, uptown and downtown, but which way do you go to get inland from New York? Go uptown?
yep,
Yeah, so if you made everything in the downtown area just point towards uptown, then all the cars would just have to go up into the peninsula or whatever. I don't know my geography. But I just feel like this would be so cool as a way of like just emptying the streets. Or you'd end up with a giant traffic jam like the beginning of the movie Daisy.
right. Well, and that's all, and this is all well and good, except that what we have seen in the face of a natural disaster, i.e., Hurricane Sandy.
Or like the 6 inches of snow that Atlanta got.
Right. Basically during Sandy, there were transformers that blew up and caused fires, and basically the grid was out.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
this is great as long as the system is still working and the mainframe is still working. But I mean, I think that is something that they would have to figure out, like some backup system, because it definitely was not the case during that particular incident.
Any
So,
large scale evacuation plan would have to include a lot of boots on the ground, like people, and but for the purposes of this article and for Siemens to be putting a plan together, obviously their plan has to involve electricity because
right,
that's
right.
kind of what they do.
And they do mention backup power sources, and that's all. I guess I'm just saying that I have seen this happen and it was not pretty. And then, in Hurricane Sandy as well, what happened was that a lot of the trains were basically left. I mean, they did the smart thing, which is they had an inkling that this might happen. So they basically shut down the transit system and they moved all the train cars out so that they wouldn't have to worry about people getting stuck on the subway, which is something that happened during a blizzard a few years ago. They had people that just weren't prepared and ended up being stuck on trains for like 8 hours, and couldn't get off, couldn't go anywhere. So that's not happy. And so at least prior to Sandy, they were like, okay, we know this is most likely going to happen. So we're just going to make sure nobody can get on the trains because we don't want to rescue people.
Hmm.
But then after, the main part of the storm was over, they really couldn't open up a lot. I mean, they've got the train systems back up pretty quickly generally, but they had the power issue. Everything below like 23rd Street was out. Um, I wasn't able to get into work unless you were willing to wait for 3 hours for a bus,
Yeah.
because the trains weren't going. So, that storm just totally decimated the whole emergency escape system. Like, I don't know that people would have been really able to get out even if they'd wanted to. So I'm all in favor for them to figure something out, basically. But um yeah, so I think that's just about it for our news today. Are you up for talking about Walking Dead?
Oh, absolutely, man. Episodes 7 and 8. What an awesome way to like kind of kick us back into this review of season 2, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that these episodes, it's like about time that we see some movement on the farm rather than them just all milling about.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say that these were like perfect, and I think I'll definitely have a few bones to pick. But so these episodes were entitled "Pretty Much Dead Already," which was
Hmm.
the mid-season finale,
Right.
and then Nebraska, which was kind of picks up right where that one left off, but in real life wasn't for like 4 months or
Right.
a couple months anyway. Um, and so pretty much dead already. Let's do this thing.
Sure.
We start off with poor Glenn.
Glenn.
He's been struggling so much in the last few episodes with like keeping secrets from everybody. And the last episode I think was called Secrets, right?
Yeah, and the beginning of this episode is him with a lot of head nodding,
Or shaking.
shaking.
Yeah.
He's in this bad position because Dale is kind of like, you should tell the group, or at least that's what I'm getting from his head shaking.
Yeah. And Maggie is like, you should not tell them because my dad and stuff.
Right. But
It's
he kind of he does a good job. He blurts it out. It's all good.
it's not quite as funny as when he blurted it out to Dale in the previous episode, where he's like, "Lori's pregnant and there's walkers in the barn."
Yeah, that was like great. His delivery there was great. In this case, it's kind of weird because you know, the reactions that everybody has are like, "What?" And you can see that they're kind of letting it sink in. And Shane just looks like he's about ready to explode.
Yeah, well, all right. Being a supporter of Team Shane, so far through the season, it gets really difficult to to see where he's coming from in the next 2 episodes, in my opinion. It's like on a some level, if you boil it right down, yeah, I can still get his point, but his reactions to almost everything go like off the crazy scale.
Right.
Yeah, but so everybody has the crazy look, and after the credits, Rick goes to try and discuss this situation with Herschel. This is a really annoying scene too. Herschel is kind of a douche.
Ah, I mean, he is a douche, but he's also kind of like, guys, need to get off my land. I'm done with you. I don't really care if you agree with my view of the walkers. I can do what I want. Kind of like, get off my lawn.
Yeah, it's like yeah. I guess more to, the doucheness is more like he knows that he should know that Rick and him need to have a conversation about this barn situation and what that means for the relationship and for the group being on the barn or on the farm. But
Yeah.
he's just sitting there reading his Bible, eating his canned peaches. It's like a total yeah, his life, his world is completely unrealistic still.
Well, and Rick calls him out on that. He's just like, look, you guys have been on the farm and basically you are not in it. You have been totally shielded from what is actually going on out there. So, if you're going to kick all of us out, then you have to understand that that might be writing our death sentence. And you need to take responsibility for that. Herschel's like, no way. I've given you guys shelter. My conscience is clean. He's just like, whatever. He's like, you guys don't agree with me. That's cool. I don't agree with you. And we're done here. Like, I've given you shelter long enough. And like Rick basically tells him, my wife's pregnant. We know that that is a problem if we leave. And I'm basically willing. He basically says, I'm willing to work with you and try to hear your side of things. Pretty much says he'll do anything to compromise to allow the group to stay.
Yeah. And let's wait a second, I guess.
Sorry.
Oh, New York, man. What are you gonna do? So much crime.
I know.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, we're good. We've also had a couple of shots of people peering into the barn through the cracks in the walls, and walkers, trying to bust out and stuff, and they're like checking the locks to see how secure it is, and they're all freaking out. And it's actually kind of around this point, or we've already been exposed to Shane just screaming all the time. Like
Yeah.
he only has like one mode during this episode, and it's like
Yelling.
yelling and running around.
Yep.
It's such a weird way for anybody to act. I feel like it doesn't seem natural. It seems obviously Jon Bernthal does a great job of, I don't know, characterizing or this character. He somehow pulls it off, but at the same time, I'm stuck feeling like, who is actually this excitable? Even though the situation is not like an emergent problem. Everything is like where it kind of needs to be. Everything is on lockdown. There's a situation that needs to be dealt with, but the running around and screaming stuff just feels. I feel maybe I'm just having a Dale reaction where I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Let's
Well,
just talk about this.
I think that part of this is to show that he is becoming unhinged and that his reactions are over the top. And even though at face, some of the things that he is saying absolutely make sense, which is like, guys, are you nuts? There's a threat in the barn we need to get rid of. Um, if he was expressing those thoughts in a more reasonable way, people might be a little bit more on board with his way of thinking, but because he is so nuts and off, like he is, you're right, he's totally over the top and acting crazy, people are just like, okay, that's just crazy talk, Shane, and they just dismiss what he's saying.
I don't feel
Um,
like people are reacting strongly enough. I guess would be the problem
oh,
I'm having.
to him?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not being like, dude, shut up, stop yelling. We don't need you to yell for us to solve this.
Well,
Well,
Dale,
Rick is the only one who's like, dude, I'm trying to handle this, and Dale is also trying to.
yeah, I was about to say Dale definitely is reacting the way he should be to this.
Well, I don't know about the whole thing where he goes and tries to hide the guns. I
Oh,
don't.
that's just silly.
Yeah. Um,
And then Shane's interaction with Lori is pretty weird.
because Rick basically tells because Shane is like, look, either we pick up and go right now, we go to Fort Benning, or we kill these walkers in the barn. Like that's still kind of a reasonable argument that he's having with Rick.
Right.
But Rick is like, we can't leave because Lori's pregnant. We
Right.
just can't go. We can't go back out there. And so Shane then ratchets it up even another notch to crazy pants. And yeah, um,
Well,
go ahead.
and his interaction with Lori about this, it's sort of like, well, he's basically like, is this my kid?
No, I don't think he asked. I think he's like, this is my child.
Sort of.
We
And she's just
carried
like,
on for a while.
yeah. And she's just like, nah, it's not yours.
And even if it was, it wasn't.
It's
It's
not
not really.
yours. I know. And, given how Shane's been, I think that she probably could have been a little bit more political in how she delivered that message, right?
Well, this episode and the next are not Laurie's finest moments.
No. Um, and and then Dale's interaction with Shane. I mean, Dale keeps running around to people telling them that Shane's crazy. And then he tells Shane he's crazy. And it's like Dale pretty much advertises everything that he's going to do, like his plans to Shane, which I never really understand. Um, it's like the dude is totally losing it, and then you're kind of doing things in a very weird way, like that are just inviting confrontation with him.
Yeah. the fact that Shane can even find Dale when he goes into the swamp to hide the guns, and he's got such a head start.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Like Shane just appears in the swamp while Dale is like, "Oh, okay, I'll just put him by this tree." And he's and this whole moment is tense. I'll give him that, and it like really drives forward the Shane Dale um, aggression. I mean,
It
Dale puts a
does.
gun in his chest, and Shane calls his bluff, and it's
Well,
intense.
it is intense, but I'm also like, Dale's decision to bring these guns into the woods.
It's dumb as hell. Like how
It's
does that
just like, how does this help the situation? Like, it doesn't. And
honestly, I felt like this was filler for the episode too.
yeah.
Other than this like ratcheting up the confrontation between those two characters,
Mm,
which I feel like we were already kind of maxed out. Dale has already accused Shane of killing Otis
right.
and pointing the gun at Rick. I don't feel like they can get any more aware of each other's. You know,
Right. We know it. Don't beat us over the head with it.
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
It does. I
and
just don't feel like that. Yeah, it's like a 5 minute scene that doesn't really drive the story forward because it's inevitable. It seems inevitable what's about to happen.
right. Um, and then you also have the interaction between um Dale and Maggie, or the angry interactions, which is not Dale and Maggie, sorry, Maggie and Glenn.
Yeah, and honestly, Maggie's a little bit. Um, I'm a little bit annoyed with Maggie in this episode. I feel like she's always annoyed with Glenn.
Right.
Even when they like started their relationship, she was basically kind of, and maybe it's just that like she's negging him or something. Like that works as a seduction technique, telling him he's the last man on earth and always kind of treating him like he's a dumbass. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the Maggie that. Thankfully, Maggie's character has been better developed as the show's gone on. She started off, and I guess maybe it is part of her being like a strong female character, is that she's got the upper hand in their relationship, but she's just always pissed off at Glenn, and Glenn is always like stuttering and apologizing, and I think we like Glenn too much for that to be going on as long as it has.
Well, right. And I mean, I think the other thing here that we're seeing with Maggie, and some of why it's a little bit annoying, is that she has been stuck on the farm, and she up until the pharmacy incident where they get attacked by walkers, um she hasn't really dealt with that kind of the threat. And she's been in, I mean, I think she's not convinced by her father's opinion, but she is somewhat swayed by that. So I think some of what we're seeing is her working through that conflict in her head.
Mm-hmm.
um but you're right, it is annoying, and it actually made me, when she was acting in this way, I was just really hoping that she worked out of it, and glad that eventually she did.
Yeah. And she does have an interesting interaction with her dad after her
She
dad
does.
and Rick have that argument where he's like, "I don't care, you got to go," and Rick's like, "I don't care, we've got to stay." She talks to Herschel in the kitchen. She's like, "Hey," she's quoting the Bible at him. She's like, what was it? Do unto others or love your neighbor or
Right.
something positive like that.
Right. And
So
he
she's
continue
arguing to have them stay.
right, and he continues to refer to Glenn as the Asian boy.
Asian boy. Yeah. Well, it is the back country
Yeah.
of Georgia. We're lucky that that's the worst he's calling him.
Yeah. Um, and then to continue some of the wonderful conflict. I mean, Rick's trying to basically work to keep the group there. So, and Herschel definitely tests him in this episode. Um, where he's kind of like, "Hey, there's some walkers stuck. Why don't you help us?"
You didn't even tell him that was what the thing was. I thought.
He said he needed help with something, I guess. He was
Yeah.
pretty vague about it. And then it turns out to be walkers that he wants to bring back to the barn. And you know what? It's very the Rick's face during these interactions is pretty awesome, because he's just like, "Really, what are we doing here?"
Yeah. And it seems ridiculously dangerous, like taking out a bunch of animal control nooses and harnessing zombies stuck in a creek
Right.
and dragging them back to the barn. It doesn't make I don't know, like the fact that this group of people has managed to do this a dozen times for all
Doesn't
those
make sense.
walkers. Even if it was mostly Otis before, Otis wasn't exactly like a little nimble fella. He was just
No, he was pretty um
rotund.
he was not fit. Um and he seemed a bit clumsy and easily winded,
They just paint this picture of Otis as having been basically the only capable person on the farm.
which is weird because that is not what I was thinking about his character generally.
Even if
Um
it was true, how have the rest of them managed as long as they have? Even if the zombies have been like really minimally encroaching on their land,
right.
it seems a little unrealistic. But yeah, so Rick has to move Lou Bush and a gentleman in some overalls uh, to the barn, and unfortunately, they come out of the woods towards the barn with their zombies in tow, just as Shane is screaming at everybody again and handing out guns, and like just about to like he's trying to give Carl a gun. Carl, who
Right.
has just recovered from a gunshot wound.
Hmm.
Granted, he went and did gun practice too, so he's kind of past that. But I don't know why he's trying to give Carl the gun so hardcore. Lori gets up in his face like this isn't your decision to make. This is a moment where Lori is good again. Like she's trying to be Rick's proxy in his absence.
Right.
It's kind of unfortunate that Rick isn't around. So Herschel kind of, by taking Rick out of the group's dynamic, he's kind of made this happen a little easier.
Right. Um and then, then comes the big reveal of the episode.
And Shane just starts sprinting. Like Jon Bernthal, man, he just takes off. Like so, the house is kind of up on a hill, slight incline from the barn. He sprints all the way down there, like bashes through a gate, and then he's just like running around Rick and
Crazy.
Herschel. He reminds me of like a junkyard dog in these scenes where he's just running around and screaming, and it's crazy.
Yeah, he is a mad dog in this episode. And then, obviously the Herschel's group and Rick's group that's been pulling these zombies back show up at this time to see this. And, Herschel looks mortified. Shane looks mortified at Rick, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I
He's just
can't
like
believe, like, what are you doing? Um, and I know he's totally crazy, but his reaction is pretty much warranted, in my opinion, here. Because he's just like, we got to end this whole thought process.
what he does is very effective.
It is, but it's not necessarily the best way to go to keep them on the farm. I get that, but he basically just shoots the heck out of the zombie that Herschel has, and is yelling that if this is a living person, why won't they die? And shoots the person right in the chest, like many times, pretty much blows out the whole chest, and then shoots it in the head, and then lets all the walkers out.
Yeah. Well, Rick is super impotent in this scene though too,
Yeah.
because he's got one of the snare poles. He's holding on to one of the zombies, and well, as soon as Herschel's zombie is put out, he's screaming at Herschel like, take this, Herschel, you have to take it."
Because
So that
he wants to get Shane.
he wants to stop Shane from opening the
Yeah,
barn. He's surrounded by other people. Why
right.
he's just
He
like
can't.
Herschel's
Yeah,
the only one who can do this for some reason. That doesn't make any sense, but I guess
no.
he could have given it to T Dog. He could have given it to Daryl. Honestly, they should have just shot it at that point because it's like the cat's out of the bag.
Right.
But yeah, so then they opened up the whole barn, and well, not the whole thing. There's still the chain at the top,
Right.
but the doors open enough that zombies start coming out, and they start a firing line and do a lot of pretty questionable marksmanship.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like center of mass type bullets going out there.
Yeah.
And we get a rare scene of Daryl shooting something other than a crossbow.
True. True. And you see the difference between the Atlanta group and the farm group, and they're just, I mean, you can tell that Herschel is thinking that this is a massacre. Like he's on his knees. Um, he's just, because you can assume that his wife is there, right?
Is yeah, and I think we get to know who she is. She's the kind of
Right. But
well dressed.
right. And I mean, we're aware that she's in there. We just don't know that entirely until a little bit later in this scene.
Yeah,
Um,
basically they know almost all of these people.
right. So it's pretty bad from that perspective. And then at long last, you want to say the last piece of this, which I'm sure people know by now.
Yeah, after the massacre, there's like a moment of quiet, and then yeah, you hear growling, and a little zombie comes out of the door, and oh yeah, look, it's Sophia. And so she has a bite mark on her like shoulder
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of blood around it, which is what I assume have to believe is how she turned. Um, my immediate question is why wasn't she just eaten? Like
Right.
she got bit and then ran away. I guess. I mean, it's
Maybe.
possible. It's
And
possible.
maybe she got bitten and just hid. Hard to tell. Um, but then of course you're wondering, okay, well, if they knew that they were looking this whole time, why did they not just own up to it? Was it just because they were keeping the secret? Or at least those are the things that
Oh,
I
why?
was
Yeah.
initially.
Why didn't they know she was in the barn? Or if they did, why weren't they? Why wasn't it obvious? Why hadn't they told the group? Yeah.
Right. And then there's a very dramatic scene because Carol sees her. Nobody can really act, and then Rick has to be the one that acts, and he walks up and he shoots her. And um, it's it's a pretty traumatic scene.
Yeah, it's powerful for sure.
And then Shane actually has a face on, like his face is like, oh, I guess maybe I screwed up a little here. I don't know. Um, and
Do you think that's what it is, or I feel like he's
uh,
just feeling bad that Sophia's dead. Like they'd all kind of come to accept it, but
yeah,
now they saw her and they felt bad. Even Shane.
even Shane. And I don't know. And then it's just a very upsetting scene. And I mean, this is really the whole reason they were on the farm to begin with, in some ways, because, doing their search from the farm area and whatever. And now that search is over. So there's and, I think you can pretty much assume Herschel's going to want them gone.
Yeah.
So,
Also, as an audience member, like this is episode 7.
mhm.
We've been looking for Sophia since the first episode of the season.
Right. So it's sort of this relief that finally this is done. This storyline was done, or at least that was what I thought. Although again, I was surprised that they decided to take out Sophia in this way in the graphic novel. She's a long-standing character in the series, and she has a lot of interesting interactions with Carl and with Glenn and Maggie. So I was surprised that they went in this direction a little bit, but not. I mean, I thought that this was where they were trending, but
I don't know that I would call her an interesting character in the graphic novel. I feel like she's kind of decoration as another kid, but I don't.
she's I didn't say interesting. I said she's long-standing and has some interesting interactions. But I mean, I think that was part of it is that people didn't think they were going to do that, and then they did. Although I admit I was just relieved that they ended this storyline, the search for Sophia.
Mhm.
Um, but you're definitely wondering what the aftermath is going to be here. And this is where also Maggie runs up because it's her mom, right? Or her stepmom.
Well, it's Beth, and that's at the beginning of the
Sorry,
next
Beth.
episode.
And oh, sorry. They blend a little bit, Stuart.
Yeah, I know. Well, they start right one after another, especially if you've
Right.
watched them that way. But yeah, so that's the end of the season ender or the season mid finale, and you're just like okay, kind of in shock, and that's a hell of a way to end for a few months to end the show. And
Right.
honestly, I'm not a huge fan of that kind of breaking
Ending.
breaking up the season, even in any TV show, just to have this like couple month break.
Right.
it's nice to know that there's more Walking Dead coming, and it's just around the corner. You know, like just wait till after Christmas and then another month, and but still, it's it's difficult
I
to
know.
wait that long. But yeah, so the next one begins, and it's entitled Nebraska.
Right.
And we do have that scene where Beth, who has had like no lines or very few lines and very little screen time so far, runs up and starts to try and like grieve over her dead mom, who is not quite dead, um, and tries to kill Beth. And then
Yep.
there's a Andrea. Like, okay, we've seen her start shooting, we've seen her make one questionable decision about a man, but she
Yep.
started to get more badass potentially. She
Hmm.
still in the last episode had an annoying interaction with Dale, except Dale was like, you know what, I don't give a fuck anymore. Go make your
Go
own
do
bad
your thing.
decisions. And then she puts this zombie down with a scythe in the head,
Yep.
which is kind of awesome.
It is awesome. And, she had the whole experience with her own sister.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I was like, okay, maybe she's gonna start to turn cool.
Yeah, we had such hopes.
Um, but as expected, Herschel's not psyched about this turn of events and wants everybody to leave
Well, his whole family is just like, yeah, they're just all like going up to the
house,
house.
getting away from everybody. Yeah.
Shane is still running around and yelling. He's like, "You knew she was there. Why did you hide her? This was on purpose." And
Yep.
Herschel's like, "Get off my lawn!"
Yeah.
And then Shane actually starts yelling at Rick. He's like,
Yep.
"You had us out in the woods looking for that dead girl, and you're just as stupid as Herschel is," and saying a lot of things that aren't really very necessary.
Right. And then the group, because they have dealt with this somewhat before, are like, okay, we need to uh we need to figure out we need to get rid of these bodies.
Yeah, so they're talking about they dig some graves and they're gonna just burn the others. And in the meantime,
But well, we could talk about one of the things about this whole thing that bothered me so much. I guess we can talk about it a little later,
what's
but
that?
they were saying we need to get them, far away from the house. And then, yeah, anyway.
Who was saying we need to get who away from the house?
Um, the group, when they're talking about burial detail, they're like saying what they need to do. We bury the ones we love, we burn the others, but we need to we need to make sure that they're far enough away from the house, like from where we're staying,
I don't remember
so
that.
as not to attract attention. So, but then they like pretty much just go down the hill a little bit. So it doesn't make any sense. But in any case, it's basically like weird cleanup. There's definitely now a divide. Shane's still going crazy and causing crazy kinds of conflicts within the group.
Yeah,
Um, and Dale is basically trying to garner support for his view of things, which is that Shane's gone off the deep end.
yeah. Well, it seems like there's going to be a big separation between the groups at this point, but actually they all get thrown back in together pretty quick because then Beth passes out.
Yep, she's like basically goes into shock, probably because of the interaction with her mother. Lori's involved in that in trying to like say, okay, we need to find Herschel. And she's working with Maggie. It doesn't seem like there's animosity there.
No,
Like they do seem to be working together.
yeah,
There's but Herschel is gone missing, so then they mobilize to basically find him.
yeah. So
And
everybody's in the room and they're like looking at his flask, looking through all this stuff. I mean, even Shane's in there, and Shane, who has just been like yelling at Rick and calling him delusional, is now like talking to Rick sensibly almost.
right.
I don't know, but it still doesn't work out because then Rick is like, oh, okay, he's probably gone to the bar in town, and that's where I'm going to go. And Lori is like, why are you leaving? This isn't the time to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Carl, she's worried because
Carl.
Carl had said I was going to shoot Sophia. Um, Actually, I could have sworn the shit he was saying to his mother was like, I thought I was going to find her and save her.
Right. So did
But then
I.
then he also says, "Oh, but Shane did the right thing by
Well,
opening
right.
the barn." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Lori then goes to Rick and is like, "He's turning cold. He needs his dad. This isn't the time to go and find Herschel, who wants us to leave anyway." And Rick is like, "Well, we're gonna need him because you're pregnant, and we're gonna need a doctor."
Right.
Makes sense. Makes
It
perfect sense.
does.
Otherwise, Shane and Lori are both telling him like, "No, if he's gone missing, that's fine. We can just live in his farm while he's missing." I'm like, this
Right.
is not a good long-term plan either.
Right.
Maybe it is. If Herschel was to just run off and die in the woods, it might solve some problems in the short term. But he is kind of a guy with some knowledge that they should try to get.
Right.
So yeah, Rick and Glenn mount up and get in the car after some smooching and stuff with Maggie and Glenn,
Mm-hmm.
which he talks about a little bit more. It's like a scene that we see from a distance where she's following him around while Rick is getting in the car and getting ready to go. And then in the car, Rick and Glenn have a kind of lengthy conversation about how Glenn didn't say "I love you" back or something. I don't know. It's not that interesting to me, honestly. I was kind of like, okay, I don't need to really know that Glenn doesn't know how to deal with women. I feel like I already know this.
Well, right. But it is a little bit of a humorous interaction between him and Rick. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and during this time, Dale is arguing with everybody. Like he goes to everybody about Shane, right? So he like talks. He's yelling at Andrea. He's yelling at T Dog. He's yelling at Lori.
Yeah.
And
Um,
he's basically, I mean, I guess, do you get the sense that he's basically trying to get them to kick Shane out?
I think he wants there to be more indignance and like outrage over what Shane has done.
And mostly it seems like people agree with it. Like,
Well, if they don't agree with it, then they're like, "Well, it's happened. What are we gonna
right,
do now?" There's no point in freaking out. I think he thinks that Shane is more of a danger. He keeps saying he's dangerous than everybody else does. They're just like, yeah, okay, he's I don't know what because they don't, most people don't talk about Shane except for Andrea and Dale and Rick and maybe Lori. Um, but yeah, I think most people think that what he did had to happen.
right. And then we also see in this episode this, kind of not a weird interaction, but you see like a little bit of a non-crazy side of Shane because Carol's kind of gone around the bend,
I don't know. You think this is
wandering.
a non-crazy side of Shane?
Well, no, not a non-crazy, but he's just like,
It's a different kind of crazy.
it is a different kind of crazy. And he, basically Carol's been wandering around in the woods. She's a little bit like I'd say she's in shock too. And Shane basically sees her wandering about and like starts to wash her, which is I know it's weird, but
It's
it's like
super weird. I don't
it is
understand what they were thinking with this scene.
it's very odd. And
Even Carol looks like she thinks it's weird when it's happening to her. You know?
but she's so catatonic she's not able to fight back. I don't know. And he's just like, I'm really sorry I shot your daughter. And it's like, okay, dude, I
He
don't know
didn't
that this
even
is
shoot her. He's just like, yeah.
I
He's like,
didn't
I don't
know.
know if I would have opened the barn if I'd known she was in there. I'm like, what? Why? No, that changes nothing.
Right.
He's having some weird guilt that doesn't really make
Yeah.
a lot of sense given how assured he's been
For
in
everything
this.
else, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't make
I
much
guess that's
sense.
what I'm trying to say. He's been so assured, and now this shows like this level of remorse for his crazy pants actions that we haven't really seen.
Yeah, and
Um,
actually, I should not reiterate, but talk about a couple of interactions that Carol had in the last episode. Also, she kind of Daryl's about to go back out on a search, and she says to him, she might be dead. Sophia might be dead, and Daryl like flips out on her,
gets
calls her a stupid bitch, and like storms off.
yeah,
And then later on, they have another chat where he apologizes and shows her more of those flowers that he thinks are a sign that Sophia is still out there.
right.
Again, I didn't really enjoy too much these scenes because mostly because it makes Daryl look like a petulant little bitch himself.
Yep.
Um, but then so she's been acting a little bit crazy since then, and her relationship with Daryl and Daryl's bond with the group has been diminished by this, I would say, too.
Yeah.
Because this is, well, I guess Carol and the search for Sophia were his main kind of all he's been doing for the group since they got to the farm.
Right. And so with Sophia gone, and I mean, I think he really honestly believed he was going to bring her back and be kind of a hero. And so the lack of faith on Carol's part, and then the fact that it turned out that Sophia was actually dead, um, weighs heavily on him. He's pissed. He's upset. And, you know, pretty much just acts out like a little kid.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed at the end of the funeral scene, just about everybody walks away in different directions because there's like a
Yes.
top-down shot,
Yep.
and
They're all walking away. Yep.
yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like almost everybody just goes off in their own direction after that, and it's kind of
Telling.
telling. Yeah, and Daryl's definitely gone off on his own, and that becomes another bit part of this episode a little bit later too.
Yep.
Um, so Glenn and Rick, however, find Herschel in the bar, just quietly drinking in this deserted town in the zombie apocalypse, which is very convenient.
Yep. And you know, Herschel's actually very upset because he's upset with himself. He feels like you get a sense of why maybe he's believed this thing that they're sick people that can be cured, and basically it's so that he wouldn't lose hope. And I think he's somewhat angry at having those rose-colored glasses pulled off, and but on the other hand, he's also feeling remorseful that he put his family in danger, the remaining people that are left, like Beth and Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
But he's kind of just ceding everything over to Rick, from what it sounds like.
Oh, and
Just saying,
that's like the first half of the conversation. In the
yeah,
second half, then he gets back up on his horse about like the Christian thing. I took you in, and you've destroyed my life.
yeah. So
So
it's like
it's
it's this very strange passive aggressive conversation.
first it's passive, and then it's aggressive.
Yeah, yes. Well,
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
yeah.
It takes these very strange turns, and then they're basically trying to convince him to come back and then all live together in harmonious happiness at the farm.
And I feel like they've basically achieved that goal.
Yeah,
And well, they keep going back and forth between the bar and the farm, um, because let's reiterate that Rick and Glenn, they know Beth has had an episode. That's why they go to find Herschel.
right.
In the meantime, Lori is freaking out about Beth's condition not getting better. It's been, we don't know how long, maybe an afternoon, and decides unilaterally to go, or, well, first she tries to
Well, I
recruit
was gonna
Daryl.
say she basically wants Daryl to go, and Daryl's just like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "They're fine. I'm not gonna go and out and risk myself. I'm tired of risking myself with the group. I'm done with all of you people." And Lori's like, "You're selfish," and then goes off like on her own. And
It
it's
doesn't make
any
any
sense.
sense.
It doesn't
They,
make any sense.
there's no new information that she has that would lead her to have to go to town and get them back faster. Nothing has changed.
No, and it doesn't seem like that much time has actually passed. Um, and you know, so she just goes off, and nobody's noticed that she took a car, and nobody,
Well,
you know, it all
she
seems,
tells Andrea to like look after Carl because she's that mom.
yeah,
So I think she does. There is some knowledge that she's gone. I assume.
yeah. But Andrea doesn't really. I mean, I think she doesn't really get that she's actually going on a reconnaissance mission because you know Andrea would totally want to be in that, involved in that.
Oh, true. Yeah, and plus nobody should go off by themselves.
No, and she knows better than that.
Yeah.
And
So
then she,
this from a writing perspective, I think this was a big mistake.
it was, and doesn't make any sense whatsoever, other than by just basically creating a drama where it just is super stupid. And she, during her drive into town, she doesn't look at the road and hits a walker and overturns her car. And we just kind of get left there. And then back at the bar, finally Herschel is going to go back just as two random men, totally outside the group, two strangers, just show up.
Yeah, and these guys turn out to be Dave and Tony from Philadelphia, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of funny. They've made it all the way to Georgia,
Yep.
and they are by turns cool and totally shifty. Um,
Well, you get the sense that they're totally shifty from the get-go, don't you? I mean,
I
that's sort of
honestly
how they're
no,
painted.
I didn't get that vibe
They're
um,
all they're all
until
sharing
Tony.
little looks, and
Only
they're
until Tony started giving a look to Dave, and that was good like 5 minutes into their conversation. After they've done the small talk and the like, oh yeah, I'm sorry Fort Benning is gone, and it's not until he starts to be like, hey, so tell me about where your camp is, and then Tony starts pissing on the wall, that then you're like, okay, no, everything is not okay here. But I feel like it started off fine.
it starts off okay, but then I mean, I guess my thing is that the defensive posture of them walking in felt weird. They keep asking about where they're staying, and they seem to be a little too nosy about that.
Yeah, that wasn't
And then
at the beginning of the conversation though.
I
That was
guess, I guess. And the thing is, what's very interesting here is that, now Rick is in the same position that Herschel was in that these are people basically that are saying, oh, we have a group and we want safe haven. And suddenly Rick and Herschel are united.
yeah. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Again, it's like it was definitely we're supposed to be seeing the irony or like the other side of the coin, where
Right.
now Rick is like there's no more room, um, and
Well, and I think part of that is because, one of them, I think was it Tony who asked if they have women?
Coos actually I believe is
Coos is what he says. I knew it was some terrible thing. And immediately they're just so defensive and like, okay, we have to figure out how to get out of here. And how they get out of there is that Rick shoots the heck out of both of them.
well the two guys reach well I guess Dave, who was played by the way by Michael Raymond James, and this tricked me into thinking that this guy was going to be a part of the show
Oh,
for
really?
yeah, because this dude he was in season 1 of True Blood, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a major character in that show. And then I'm pretty sure like right after that season had ended, this show this he shows up in this in Walking Dead, and I'm like, oh, awesome! Now we're gonna have a new guy in the show.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, that turned out not to be the case. Um, just purely based on the fact that he's like an actor.
He's a known actor,
He's a
so
known
yeah.
actor, and usually when you see that, if you like meta TV writing, you can be like, oh yeah, okay, so this is what this means now. But I totally got tricked because he tries to pull on Rick, and Rick was way too fast. Shoots him in the head, and the other guy he shoots the other guy 3 times,
Right.
and it's a pretty badass little showdown. Not entirely sure what the two Philadelphia guys hoped to achieve. They had not extracted the intelligence that they needed, so why would they think, okay, let's shoot, instead of, okay, let's leave and then follow them back to their farm or
Or
something?
maybe they were thinking they were going to take out Rick and Glenn and torture Herschel into it.
Potentially. That
I
yeah,
mean,
that is another
that's
option.
into telling them. But it's a stressful situation. It is one that unites Herschel and Rick and Glenn. But it's also one in where you definitely now Rick is most certainly the person that is in charge. Like Herschel has totally ceded everything to him.
Well,
Even though he's willing to work with him, but you get the sense that he's just like, okay, you're the boss now because you're right, you know more about this world than I do.
I don't know that
But
we've heard Herschel's side on the killing of living people yet at this
you
point.
haven't, but you also see that he understands that, or I don't know, maybe not at this point, but you get that sense that and it's this big deal because they basically killed people that are not infected.
Yeah.
And it's scary. And it's also realizing that not only is the threat, and Rick finally, I think, gets Herschel's perspective on this, not only is the threat The Walking Dead, but it's other people.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I feel like this could have gone so many, at least a couple different ways. This other group that we don't know about, is not very well defined, and maybe that's like the beauty of it from a story perspective. We don't know much about these guys. All we know is that Tony and Dave are a bit skeezy and a little too
mhm.
curious, but it's kind of gray to me. These are not necessarily bad guys, but the way this
No,
situation goes, um, like Rick and well, all of their actions basically force them down this path.
right. And I mean, the other thing that they do is that they share information about places that had been potentially rumored as safe. And the fact that no, those are definitely not an option.
With the exception perhaps of Nebraska,
Right.
which everybody's just like joking. They're like, no way, no, we're not going to fucking Nebraska. What a
Right.
terrible idea, which is a total slight on people from Nebraska. So I'm sorry, Nebraskans.
Yes. Um, and does the whole show end? Sorry, I watched this a little bit before, but did the whole show end with Laurie's car just overturned?
We don't even see her again. Like that happens probably 3/4 of the way through the episode, and
Right.
we don't see that car again for the rest of the episode. It
Okay.
ends with Shane and T Dog burning a pile of walkers.
Oh, okay. Which is my thing, which is like, they basically took it so close to the house, and then, you can't help but think that if they're now this other group of survivors out there, that they're going to see the smoke and it's going to be dangerous.
I see.
So that was,
Well, with Rick and Glenn, they drove for a while to get to town.
I
They had that
guess,
whole conversation.
but you still have no idea exactly where
No,
the
I
other
mean it's
people
it's
might be.
close enough that Glenn and Maggie have done it on horseback a couple times. It didn't seem to
Right.
take very long.
Right.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so already, like by the end of this episode, we are in a very different place than we were at the barn shooting.
Well, yeah, and you feel like you're finally out of this rut of the Sophia search too. So
True.
there's been like a lot more action in these two episodes than there have been in the last few, which was a total relief to me.
Hmm.
And I was sort of like, great, now the season's getting going.
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. You think you're ahead of me now, aren't you?
I am, I am, but I think that's also a good sign where you want to watch the next episodes.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. But yeah, so is there anything else that you want to mention about these two episodes that, or I mean, I feel like if where I'm at, I would assume that Shane is going to murder Dale pretty soon.
Yeah, that's what it feels like is going to happen. And part, and I feel like Dale is totally naive about this,
Well,
which he shouldn't be, but he just feels like, I don't know, it just feels like he doesn't fully get it.
he's definitely been poking the bear, hasn't he? But he's also been saying to Lori, like, I knew guys like Shane, and sooner or later he's going to kill again. Like, he seems to be aware that Shane is a murderous son of a gun.
Yeah, but he seems more worried for, say, her or whatever than for himself. Like, so it's almost like he's worried for Rick, but he's not as worried for himself. That's what it seems like, or maybe that's just how he's trying to play it to her.
Hmm.
Um, but in any case, I guess we shall see how that unfolds.
That concludes our review of episodes 7 and 8 of season 2 of The Walking Dead. Pretty much dead already, and Nebraska. And make sure that you check in with us next time when we go through episodes 9 and 10, Trigger Finger and 18 Miles Out.
Right. And if you have any comments about these two episodes or suggestions for things you would like to hear us review in the future, please shoot us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or is it pcast? No.
Podcast.
Sorry. And on Twitter, we are reanimatedpcast.
Yeah, I haven't done this in too long. Can't even remember our own
Right.
email address.
And show notes and all sorts of exciting things are at reanimatedpodcast.com. So until next time, folks, adios.
Peace out.